My name is Anto Budiarjo. I'm the President and CEO of Clasma Events, and welcome you here to Connectivity Week, and specifically on this press briefing. So we've been organizing conferences and events and expo around smart grid since 2005, essentially before smart grid became cool, which it seems to be now. Everybody wants to do smart grid. I hear that Rachel Ray is going to do a smart grid cooking show. So anyway, so we've been doing this and for now nearly 5 years, and clearly the space has grown and it's been very interesting. But I think it became clear, not just to us, but to a lot of people, that a lot of the activity around smart grid has predominantly been on the utility side, on technology issues, and a lot of policy issues, and those are all things that need to be dealt with, clearly, because it's a major challenge that we have. But I think I detected sort of a shift about 6 to 9 months ago, that people are saying, what about the consumers? We're not asking the right questions, and we're not including that sort of conversation within smart grid.
Hi, my name is Jamie Wimberly. I'm the CEO of Echoline. I know some of you, but let me give you a little bit of information about Echoline so you know the source of where this survey is coming from. Echoline is a full marketing service agency. We actually are a part of DFG, which is a small holding company in this space. So there's a management consulting firm, and there's also a small fund called DFG Ventures, which focuses on early stage investments in clean tech. But Echoline has been around for 3 years now. We actually work with, in addition to Clasma, we've worked with other partners like Russell Research, who actually conducted this survey. And so we have a nice network of service providers that we work with. We founded Echoline with a very basic question and proposition, and so it's kind of our mission statement around the green gap, what we call the green gap, and that closing that gap. And what the green gap is the difference between stated intentions, what consumers say is important to them, and what they're actually doing about it in regard to their purchasing decisions and other behavior that impact energy consumption and or the environment. And so, you know, there's all kinds of little factoids, and we have a bunch of them on our website, but I mean, this big discrepancy about what they're saying in regard to energy efficiency and what they're actually doing about it. And that gap, we think, is at the crux of some of our issues as far as getting further engagement, getting further penetration, not only in terms of energy efficiency, but demand response and other offerings and things that are come off of smart grid itself. So as Anto said, we decided, we have a series called Echo Opinion. So one of the ways that we decided to show some thought leadership and help close that gap is that we have been doing a series of consumer surveys called Echo Opinion. And Echo Opinion, again, Russell Research does it for us, based out of New York City. They do a lot of Fortune 500 work. But we go out and interview online 1,000 plus Americans. It's all geographically well distributed. It's statistically significant. And some of the topics that we've done in the past were around things like looking at the words that people use. So we've tested things like energy efficiency, smart grid, you know, people's understanding, their acceptance of those words. We've also looked at if there was any brand in the space, and that was a very interesting survey. We've also looked at things around climate change. Well, this one is about smart grid, and we were really testing about customer perceptions and expectations connected to smart grid. And we did this, and this is the first time we've ever done one in conjunction with another firm, but we were glad to do that with Clasma, and so it's actually done in conjunction and partnership with Clasma. Now, there's a story here, and the story is pretty simple. There's an opportunity, and there are 3 challenges. And the opportunity is really around the fact that smart grid is an empty vessel. This mirrors the findings of a lot of other surveys that have been done asking people, are you aware of smart grid? Are you familiar with it? Most Americans have never heard of smart grid. So and this is, close to 70% haven't heard of it. We see that as not necessarily a bad thing because it's an empty vessel, meaning that you can shape and define it still. And that is also backed up by the fact that there's time to do so. They have no fixed idea of when smart grid is going to be operational in their communities. And so, again, there's a little bit of a window because, as you're going to hear, there's a lot of work to do. Another thing, this is a little bit, we've heard some things in the press that, about, the PG&E experience or other experiences about, all of a sudden consumers are up in arms around smart grid. But what we have found is that actually consumers find the idea of smart grid, once they're given a pretty basic definition, to be pretty appealing to them. Almost 20% of fifth either thought it was extremely appealing, and then almost, half thought it was either extremely or very appealing. So that's pretty strong positives. And this is kind of interesting too, because they said they're going to use it a lot. On average, they said they were going to use it 12 times a month. Once a month, so 12 times a year. So, again, that is not something that you're normally hearing when you're hearing it in the press or when you would think, okay, are people going to actually use it? But again, based on, a very simple definition of what smart grid is as a communications device helping them manage their energy spend and their consumption, that they like it and they're going to use it. They also expect that it's going to benefit them. So 55% of homeowners said yes, they think that smart grid is going to benefit them personally. So that's the good news. Now, what are the challenges? Challenge number one is meeting customer expectations around smart grid as a way to lower or contain costs. But smart grid is being pitched as a means to respond to those concerns. But is it going to be enough? And it's very clear that they have put smart grid in the context of utilities and the commodity. Okay? They look at smart grid as a way to lower my bills, affect my consumption, decrease it, or in some ways manage it. So this is all about basically kind of a smart meter or commodity kind of focus, meaning around price and cost containment. And that's what they think that they're investing in smart grid, what smart grid is going to do for them. And again, we did a word cloud, so we asked them, like, okay, what's the one word that you would use to talk about your concern over smart grid, your biggest concern? And, front and center, cost. And then again, we're hearing a lot about privacy. And again, notice cost has a lot. There's cost, price, expense, expensive, and then privacy, control, invasive. Those are pretty clear messages about, in terms of how the average consumer is thinking about, again, what their concern is. So the challenge number two is moving beyond smart meters to a broader vision of smart grid. What do we mean by that? Again, when we ask consumers, what are the top 3 things that you want to know about smart grid? They talk, or smart meters, they talk about cost and commodities. So what will the smart grid cost? How will the smart grid save me money? How will the smart grid impact my bill? Those 3 things, there's no comparison. Okay, so again, it's that commodity smart meter kind of mentality. It means it's around price. It's around containing costs. Yet, we asked another one-word response. We asked, if you were going to give an emotional word, how would you describe how you feel about smart grid? And basically, the story here is interesting because you have good, happy, great, innovative, intelligent. There's two stories. One is that predominantly it's a positive emotional kind of context in which customers think, well, I kind of like what I'm hearing. I kind of like that. In fact, it's more than liking. I mean, when you have great and others. I mean, some are really kind of pretty excited about the idea of smart grid becoming operational in their communities. The other thing is a little strange. I mean, this savings, you know, most people don't think of savings as an emotion, but this kind of thing, though, this is a strange finding, and it's a strange finding that was echoed in other research that we've done. And the fact of the matter is there is an emotional context to that word savings. Now, here's the third challenge, okay? The third challenge is about aligning smart grid with smart communications and marketing. And the easiest way to think about this challenge is asking, what's so smart about smart grid if blank? So let's go through that. So what's so smart about smart grid if the bill looks the same and yet it's higher? And so basically any billing event, big billing event, has the potential at least for customers to point their finger at smart grid and say, that's the reason my bill is higher. So again, what's so smart about smart grid? If I can't get the information the way I want it, and my provider doesn't even know who I am when I call. One of the biggest issues I think about smart grid that I see with some of our clients is that they don't have the back office support or the systems or the CRM, which is the customer relationship management, to even know oftentimes who that individual is when they call the call center or when they contact them. And if they don't know who they are and they supposedly got smart grid, I think that's a big problem. Here's another tricky one, and it gets to that concern around privacy. Remember, a big word, privacy, as far as concern. What's so smart about smart grid if I can't control who has access to and uses my energy consumption data? When asked, customers are point blank, I want control. And if I don't have control alone, I want to maybe give it to family members or custodians. One of the things, too, is that this space still, which hasn't been focused on consumers. I mean, again, remember, we're coming from a very regulated monopoly kind of industry that, to be frank, I've heard CEOs in the industry say that if I didn't have to have customers, they wouldn't have customers. And basically, what I think we need to recognize is that we're moving away from customer or consumer to individuals, all right? Increasingly, this space, services being defined by personal relevance, the ability to interact, so communication and collaboration. I mean, some very strong drivers that are connected to social media and other things, other service kind of expectations. Okay, so one big opportunity, 3 critical challenges, 3 hard challenges, I have to say. So what do you do? Well, one of the things that when we looked at it as an agency, I mean, this is just us. I mean, we're just taking what we saw in the findings and the data, and we said, okay, if we were going to start communicating about this, and we were going to talk to our clients about it, I would start, and you're starting here with the rollout of the smart meter. So, a lot of utilities right now are rolling out their smart meters, and it's, and so over the next 5 years, that's what they're going to be doing. What we're telling them is, or we would tell them, based off of what we saw in this, is, all of a sudden, this isn't smart grid anymore, okay? You're rolling out infrastructure. You're rolling out infrastructure upgrades. Focus on the grid. You're not doing smart grid because basically what you're doing is a very limited and locally targeted. So you're doing a neighborhood infrastructure project. So your crews are in there and you have signage, and basically you're saying we're upgrading the backbone of this neighborhood, the network, okay? The objective is to get from the engineering, the utility side of the meter, those benefits to the benefits going to the consumer themselves. So really, to get to when you're actually coming to market with something that they're going to actually value. whether that be a billing and payment or programs or something, but something that comes off of that basic capability. So the messages we would say would be around reliability, visibility, and billing, okay? So maybe that's your first offering would be a prepay or something like that. Now that would be different. I mean, again, you talk then about the prepay. The second bucket here is moving from the infrastructure focus to when you have services, when you have something new coming off of smart grid, and then you talk about it as a managed service. Okay, then again, you're moving away from that commodity alone focus, and you're starting to talk about what you can do on top of that commodity to help that customer manage or lower their bills. The customer not only it's more customer oriented, but it's proactive. I think one of the smart grid things that when you start talking about smart grid from a customer perspective, is that it needs to be proactive and it needs to be predictive. Customers shouldn't have to wait around and wait to get a huge bill when you can basically help them and say, look, I know you only wanted to spend $100, $150 a month. You're getting close to that. Let me help you. So the message is here then is like giving the customers more control, aggregating their services. Then you start talking about savings as a bundled package and convenience. This last one, and this last one, quite frankly, is, I mean, some of the bigger new providers that are coming in here, they should start talking about this now. But it's a vision about where they want to go with smart grid in terms of where they're taking it. And quite frankly, smart grid at this last bucket, I would say that's where there's brand potential. That's when, again, you're creating something that is emotionally engaging customers that they're willing to pay a premium price for, because they're getting more value and satisfaction out of what you're offering them. This goes beyond energy. And then finally, getting away from this managed services is really what does brand entail in this space? Well, I think that what brand entails, again, that emotional engagement that people are willing to pay more for, it means about enabling experiences. And moreover, not just stopping there, but also, we've hit gold. And I think smart grid has, again, potentially can finally make that jump from commodity to things that people really, really matter to people, meaning around their identity and also in terms of their lifestyles. So the question is then, how do you make smart grid and all the stuff that's coming off of smart grid, all that new great stuff, how do you make it visible and relevant? And what I mean by visible, how do you extend it away from just the customer so they can begin to identify themselves with it and it has meaning, there's currency there. Up to this point, there's been a lot of attention on the utility side of the meter and on the grid, that networking or engineering part. And now I think that there's room for, there's an appetite for a greater kind of exploration and discussion about where the customer is in terms of smart grid going in the future.